Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I hear a lot of people getting down to the last straw. Getting down to the wire before they will even look at the options, that they have to have something like that happen to push them over the edge.
You know, we do see this all the time of drawing a line in the sand. That, and this is the line, when he becomes incontinent, when I can no longer sleep through the night, when he doesn't know my name, all that sort of thing. And then you see that when you come to that point, come on in, we'll grab you a chair. There's a chair right up there. When you come to that point, you tend to move that line. Caregivers can do so much, and you do so much more than you think you can. So that line, we see it all the time. You draw that line, and then it gets moved. Well, he doesn't know my name, but he still knows that I'm his son. I shouldn't use Chuck as an example, excuse me. He still knows that I'm his nephew. But you continually draw that line. Oh, I didn't think I could deal with incontinence, but it's not so bad. It's just urine at this point. So let's push off that line. So I think that's something, when all that discussion, to look for is waiting for the very last minute, and how helpful is that, and how easy it then is it, Debbie, for them to adjust in the facility when you do wait to that very last minute, when they don't have any of the skills that they used to have, and maybe you want to talk about that.
Well, it's hard no matter what. It's very hard no matter what, or what time you place a loved one in a facility. But when you place a person in a facility to where there is an awareness of, I'm here, I can engage, I can do activities. Oh, there's somebody I like. Oh, they want me to interact. Oh, I'm supposed to go over here. They are aware enough that they can learn these things. But when you place them too far or too late, it's like, where are you? Why aren't you here? I need you. And I'm not pointing my finger at you. It's like
You've become the
that's
example.
it's you are the only thing, and then they can't learn beyond that ability because they've gone down too far of a step.
Can I ask a question when you're saying going to facility, because we all try very hard to keep them at home, and my situation, if the meds are working, then do I get another year, another 2 years? But what you're saying, Debbie, is when would be a time? You don't want to place them when you can handle them and still enjoy them.
Well, I think there's probably a dropping of the shoe time. Right now, you're saying, are you getting sleep at night? Are you getting some rest so that you can function? Because you, the caregiver, are so important. So if you're not to that point and the things are working, you're going to daycare, you're putting these things in there. Okay, but meanwhile, you're doing your shopping of the right facility. So you've chosen the right facility. So when the shoe drops, I haven't slept in 3 days. He's angry at me. Something's gonna say, it's time. You'll know when it's time, and you've got things in place. So I think you will know. So if you're still functioning, he's still able to function at home, you're still getting the rest you need, he's still eating, is he going to day program? So if these things are in place, you're still doing well. There'll come a time.
To tag on, thank you. What's she saying? That was a really hard word, I couldn't come up with it. It was long, complicated. You know how we talk a lot about the oxygen? On the airplane, they tell you put the oxygen on yourself first. And then we joke about it in group that if you don't have the oxygen on, then how are you going to help anybody else? And I like what Debbie's saying in terms of that, because when is a better time to be doing your exploration and you're looking at options? When you have the oxygen going or not? When you're feeling like you're out of oxygen, you're out of air, that's not necessarily a good time to be looking and considering options. considering options is free. You know, you don't have to make any major decisions right away or whatever. So don't mistake our doing this series as any kind of push to make you do your care any differently right now if what you're doing now is good and working.
Yeah, that's,
But it's the consider the alternatives kind of thing. We have several people wanting to say something. Were you?
that's a problem, but it's come up. One of my sons was here 2 weeks ago, and it was not good. And he saw him fall, and he saw him get angry and that kind of thing, which was a bad day, but, you know, you have them, and then the rest of the days are good. We all go through that. So now I'm getting emails from him saying, I am not planning ahead. I'm not doing things that I should be doing. I should be doing this and I should be doing that. And so I'm going to mail this to him, or email it to him, and show him that Mom is doing something.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know whether the rest of you, maybe you all don't have that, but he doesn't say that he has to be placed yet, but he just says, you must be planning, you must be planning. And I think it's important that we tell our kids that we are planning.
Right on.
Yeah, and planning isn't necessarily actually doing it,
Right.
it's data collecting
Right.
and facing what are your fears and, you know, your complications of it. You two each had something that they wanted to say.
Debbie taught me a lot. I've been here many years, a few years, and with my husband. And it was a hard decision to do. But it was better earlier than later. He's,
That's what I heard Dr. Becker
Earlier.
said in a meeting the other
he,
day.
Yeah.
he is very content, and I see him almost every day. He's,
And did you have something?
Don has been at Arden Courts now for about 5 weeks, 6 weeks. I have not seen him for the last 10 days. I feel like I've jumped out of the frying pan into the fire because he did not like Arden Courts when he was in respite and said, as you folks, you know, he would never go back there. He hated every moment of it. When I call them at Arden Courts, they tell me that he's having a wonderful time, he's relating well to people, but he won't show us that. He will not show me that, he will not show it to my children. He cries about going home, and the last time that I was there, which was a week ago Sunday, with my granddaughter, he was verbally abusive to me and grabbed me, and took the dog's leash, wouldn't let me go, and was hurting me, and so I just decided I can't go back there because, and yet I'm dealing with family members who are supportive to a point, but I've talked about my nurse son who wants me to get in there and get the records, medical records, and I'm supposed to do this and I'm supposed to do that, and he's got all these high-flown words of stuff I should ask him about, and I'm not in a position to be the nurse checking on the other nurse. You know, I have to trust people. And I trusted your recommendations when it became absolutely crazy for me because he wouldn't go anywhere, he wouldn't do anything. He was losing his ability to walk because he wasn't moving. And now he's walking around.
You had crossed the line in the sand.
I had
You
crossed
crossed
that line in my own. I was a
Yeah.
nervous wreck because I
Yeah.
felt so responsible
So
for
you
caring
had to
for
be-
him, and I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't take care of him anymore. He was just, everything was no. He was not going to do any of that. He went to daycare once, been there, done that, came here once, been there, done that, won't go back again, you
Yeah,
know.
so you tried some things too.
Yeah, I tried all of those things, and and as far as he's concerned, he can take care of himself. And I have
Yeah.
a lot of, I have a lot of nerve to speak to anyone about him. He's going to take care of it all himself.
Well, and we're back
So-
to having to deal with the person's reason, and it isn't always pretty.
No,
Yeah.
it is not pretty.
Ken, right?
Ken, Warren, whatever.
I almost said Kevin.
I'm gonna apologize for all the children who don't come and participate in taking care of their parents, because My father was diagnosed with Alzheimer's back in 2001. He went into skilled nursing in 2004 and passed away in 2009. In 2012, my mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And I was the distant caregiver who kept giving my mom directions on how to handle my father and the things that she should do. You know, and then I came down, my mom had been admitted with a urinary tract infection to the hospital. When we got her out, they said this has brought forward underlying dementia. Other things started to make sense, and suddenly in September of 2012, my life in Chicago ended, my life in Naples started, and everything turned upside down. And what I became very clear on is that the whole disease is a runaway train. You're always making decisions out of crises. And, you know, one thing after another. So, like, the fear of making the wrong decision, I found often the decision ended up being taken away from you. You know, and what finally ended up being decision making for me was when I missed my son's college graduation because there was absolutely no one to come take care of my mother and I had become completely tethered to the house. I said, I no longer have quality of life. And if I have no quality of life, I'm not doing the right thing for her because she has no quality of life. I found myself angry all the time and argued and tried to, you know, rationalize, and you start to realize it's illogical, and made the point of, okay, I'm gonna make these other decisions. And little by little, the process became about surrendering and accepting that my mom was no longer the person that I knew her to be, that my memories were what they were of her, and that was important, but that I really had to relate to her the way the new people in her life were relating to her, her doctor, the people at daycare, or whatever, because they were seeing who my mom was in that moment. I was still seeing who my mom was when I grew up. And so letting go of that and making decisions based on who you're dealing with now versus the expectations you have of who they should be.
Anybody else having a hard time letting go of the person they used to be?
Well said.
Yeah, very well said.
Yeah, that's very good.
Beth, were you gonna say something about that?
I wasn't, but I can say I'm having a very big problem letting go because Greg wants to be attached to me all the time. And today, as we're coming here, I have done 2 different things today. Tennis was one of them, and he's very depressed in the car, which is not what he usually does, but he is very depressed because he realizes he has no interests, sleeps all the time, not the person he used to be. So I'll be dealing with that later today. But yesterday I tried to have a conversation with him about his dementia, and we had a good conversation. So I was talking to him like I would talk to my old husband, and he said, see, we can have a discussion like this. And I said, yes, but the only problem is we've had 10 others of the exact same discussion. But having those discussions is what, it's crazy, right? I mean, it doesn't make any sense to have those discussions, and I continue to do it over and over and over and over again.
Well, and all of these are really, I really appreciate you guys sharing, because these are really personal stories, and they represent your pain and your difficulty in what you're going through. And, you know, obviously there's a lot more to this than what we can put on paper. But there's a lot of things that block us from even thinking about doing it differently than we have been doing. And for a lot of these reasons, that letting go, that acceptance, we have a whole group that meets once a month just on acceptance because it's so important. Guilt, you know, while we were talking about fear, there's a lot of stuff that came up that indicates guilt too. Like I said, this is all kind of interchangeable, and the changing of roles. You know, part of accepting your person's change is accepting your role change. You've gone from a spouse or a son or a daughter or a sister or brother. You've gone from this family relationship to you are now manager or coordinator or social worker, or nurse, or exactly. But it's not the role you set out in.